This is the Gospel of Jesus Christ according to St. Luke, the 15th chapter. Now all the tax collectors and sinners were coming near to listen to Jesus, and the Pharisees and the scribes were grumbling and saying, "This fellow welcomed sinners and eats with them." So he told them this parable. There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, "Father, give me the share of the property that will belong to me." So he divided his property between them, and a few days later the younger son gathered all he had and traveled to a distant country, and there he squandered his property in dissolute living. When he had spent everything, a severe famine took place throughout the country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed the pigs. He would gladly have filled himself with the pods that the pigs were eating, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, "How many of my father's hired hands have bread enough to spare, but here I am, dying of hunger." You know what? Let's stop there. Most of us have heard this story so often that I think we're stuck in our vision of who we think each character represents in this parable. And I don't think it's a vision that serves us within the church in our recognizing our need for God. See, most of us tend to compare the younger son to those who, for one reason or other, have left the institutional church. We have a bad habit of viewing all things within the church as virtuous, or at least capable of virtue, and everything outside of the church is hedonistic, sinful, or at least leaning in that direction. I hear it. I hear it in the way congregation members talk to me about how we need to get people back in the church. They have gone off and squandered their wealth on dissolute living, and they need to come back home. And not only is that not always necessarily true, spiritual trauma is a real thing. The church does inflict it, and some need to protect themselves. But I don't think it's liturgically appropriate for the season for us to be looking at what others did. This is Lent. Lent is a time when we should be honestly looking at the wreck of the situation in which we find ourselves and reflecting on the role we played in getting us here, turning ourselves back to how much we need God. We should be doing what the younger son is doing, laying there, looking at the pig slop before us and realizing just exactly where we are. And I want us to do that collectively today with this story. I mean, there's value in individual introspection, but I want us to look at where we are as an institution, honestly reflect on the role we as U.S. Christian communities played in getting us here, because the congregations I serve are not an anomaly. Most communities of faith are operating at a loss, wondering if they'll survive. I mean, we may not be dead, but we are happy with whatever scraps we can gather before us. And it's never healthy in any season to look at others to find sin. But this is Lent, so we should definitely be holding that mirror firmly pointed back at ourselves and say, really, who was living higher on the hog for the last century? Was it us in the institutional church or those outside of it? Let's be honest. Who had more respect, right? We were the ones having ourselves a time, weren't we? I mean, the church has had ups and downs, eras over the centuries, but in the last century, the boys came home from war and they went right down to the business of having life as they wanted it. It was a work hard, play hard mindset, and folks went about building churches and communities in the model of the culture they were trying to establish. And over the next several decades, we took everything we thought was our rightful share as children of God. We took the respect that was given us in town halls and in Congress just for claiming the name of Christ. We took the attendance numbers, the donations, and the volunteer hours that built our buildings, established our camps, made sure the pews were filled. And it was great. I know it was. Not only do I remember some of it, I remember the time when I could go to church in the evening to find out what was happening on a Saturday night because I knew all my friends would be there. But I hear from the people I serve how much better it was before that. There were some good times. And now here we are, eyeing up the scraps. And I think there's still value in our little communities. But we can be honest. It's not as fun as it was back when we still had the inheritance we demanded. Back when you could guilt somebody into taking part of these communities. But here we are. Some of us want to double down on the guilt, but it's Lent. Put the mirror back on ourselves. I don't want us pointing our fingers out at those people. I don't even want us looking at legitimate factors that some of our communities have been victim to, like the loss of industry, leading to an aging population as children and grandchildren need to go looking for work. It's Lent. So let's ask ourselves, in what ways did we squander that inheritance? In what ways did we not steward what God gave us? What is the metaphorical dissolute living within our corporate institutional past? How many times, instead of collectively rejoicing over sanctuaries teeming with young and vibrant life, did we scold children and their wearied parents because they weren't behaving as we expected them to? How many times did our actions communicate to people new to the institution that, they would be loved if they conform to our vision and cultural expectations? How many times did we spend the inheritance we were given to earn deference and respect in the public square from neighbors that we really weren't serving in any meaningful way, but who we still expected to give lip service to Christ as King? How many times did our actions tell somebody that they weren't beloved as they were? Small and struggling congregations still do a lot of good work. We are making use of the gifts God has given us. And there's great value for our communities and what we do. But it's Lent. It's time to reflect on how much we need God, just how poorly we've done on our own. And if this season is going to successfully give us any awareness of just what a wonderful gift grace is, then we need to be honest about just how bad we messed it up. How many times we were not the appropriate mouthpiece of God's love. And the thing is, No one we've hurt along the way. No one. Even people we've inadvertently hurt, none of them owe this institution their forgiveness. We don't deserve it. But look where we are. Even if we were to become servants of these people God made, wouldn't that be better than slowly dying here? Isn't it worth it for us to go to our neighbors and say, would you take me on as a hired hand? And the parable continues. I will get up and go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me like one of your hired hands. So he set off and went to his father, but while he was still far off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. He ran and put his arms around him and kissed him. Then the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his slaves, Quickly, bring out a robe, the best one, and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet, and get the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And they began to celebrate. And let's not kid ourselves into believing that everyone that we bring our apologies to will accept them with that kind of joyous response. The honesty of this parable continues. Now his elder son was in the field, and when he came and approached the house, he heard music and dancing. He called one of the slaves and asked what was going on. He replied, Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fatted calf, because he has got him back safe and sound. Then he became angry and refused to go in. His father came out and began to plead with him, but he answered his father, Listen, for all these years I have been working like a slave for you, and I have never disobeyed your command, yet you have never given me even a young goat so that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours comes back, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fatted calf for him. Then the father said to him, Son, you are always with me. All that is mine is yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice because this brother of yours was dead and has come to life. He was lost and has been found. And that's what the penitence of Lent is really about. It's not about sackcloth and ashes and beating ourselves up. It's about seeing the hope that was dead come to life, the love that was lost be found. And see, the only hope we have of participating in God's work in this world is to honestly admit the mistakes we've made and to try and fix the damage we've caused. We need to fix the doors we've broken. Even if we broke them on accident, they're still broken. And that's hard enough to do. And then we see not everyone's going to think we're honest in that work. They'll think we're just pretending, hoping that someone will slaughter a fatted calf for us. Because that's part of penitence and repairing damage too. Knowing that it doesn't always come with credit. It's hard to accept. We want to defend ourselves and say we are honest in this intention, but it's not our place to do that in the face of people our actions have hurt. It's just our place to offer ourselves as hired hands. That's our work. The proclaiming alive that which was dead, that's God's work. We don't do that. God does all that. But we can assure one another that God does it because that's the kind of radically irresponsible thing God gets up to. Loving people like us that have squandered all that we have been given. That's the gospel of our Lord. Praise to you, O Christ.